social environment around Dr. King?
One more.
Hey all, I'm gonna sit, if that's okay. Thank you all for coming. I just wanna also reference the space that we're in, the area of Oakwood, which has been a city of struggle, an area of struggle, particularly Black and Latino working class folks. This was where people were segregated, the servants' neighborhood, okay? So this is where Blacks and Latino servants were relegated to live. And then they realized it was a nice neighborhood and they pushed a lot of folks out. But this is an area of political struggle. And it's important for us to remember and to see ourselves as actors in political struggle. Part of my hope is to engage about King as a person, some of the things that came before him during the struggle that he was part of, and also how we can see ourselves in the movements and situations that we're faced with today, and what we can do to advance those. So one of the most important contributions that I think Martin Luther King made was the fight against imperialism for economic justice through the radicalization of youth and the working class. When we think about organizations that existed during that time, one of them being SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, many of those folks were very young, teenagers, 20 years old, went to the South, knowing, and some of them actually losing their lives, disappearing into the rivers, never to be found again. And people still continue to struggle. And it was in part because of the inspiration that Martin Luther King gave, the soul of the movement, so to speak. As Brady had mentioned, a very important quote from Lenin, that the capitalist class, if they can't disappear someone, they make them a saint. They make them completely unattainable. They hide their actual and sanitize who they are as a person, so you don't get to understand who they are. And no one has suffered that more, I think, than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When they repeat things about him, they repeat his calls for love. But their idea of that is conciliation, that we should be quiet. We should protest, we should speak out, but only in a way that is acceptable to them and only in a way that does not disrupt the functioning of capitalism. And that's how they use King. King said, it is righteous to break unjust laws. King said it is righteous to break unjust laws. He would take the streets, he would protest, he would disrupt, he would strike, and he did, and he encouraged that. King came from a long line of socialists, Black socialists, and I'll mention one, Peter H. Clark, who was born in slavery, escaped to Ohio, and joined the International Working Men's Association, the first international organized by Karl Marx. And I'd like to also mention that yesterday, February 21st, was the anniversary of the publishing of the Communist Manifesto. And so, let's go. Karl Marx said, and Sada Shakur said, we have nothing to lose but our chains. And that was yesterday, February 21st. Although I do not subscribe to pacifism, I do understand that as a political strategy, the willingness to disrupt, the willingness to even go along with the bourgeois' own laws, but to subvert one of the most powerful problems, which is racism, underlined by capitalism. Through the slave system that existed, it created a racialized system of proletarians who were Black, to be able to maintain that super exploitation and to keep other people who weren't Black in total fear of being able to be subjected to those repressions, to those groups. King, the civil rights movement, groups like SNCC undermined those strong traditions. And when King was assassinated, it was through a bipartisan regime that had allowed the murder of Black people to be acceptable. Kangaroo courts when Black people protested, being lynched in the streets, and not just in the South. An important point I wanted to make, and if folks check out the reading list, King of the North, I read it, is a great book because it also talks about King's organizing outside of the South. A lot of liberal media loved to disparage the South. Oh, look at them, they're backward, violent hicks, right? And there's some classism in there, but like, look at them, they're so bad. Here in the North, we're so great. Well, let's talk about it. What King did in Los Angeles, okay, in LA, was protest against police brutality. against the murder of Nation of Islam Roland X. Stokes, who he and Malcolm X together. King protested against Proposition 14, which legalized segregation throughout California. He spoke out against it. He said Los Angeles was more segregated than Birmingham, and not just in Los Angeles. In Chicago, King organized against the slums that were so bad that there was a campaign against a baby who was eaten to death by rats. When King talks about slums, he's not just saying it in the abstract, he's saying it because he lived in these cities. In Chicago, King organized political gangs like the Vice Lords. He invited them to his apartments. And they weren't pacifists, but they respected him. And he respected them. He respected the militancy and the combativeness of the youth. And they felt respected, so much so that different groups, different rival gangs in Chicago protected Martin Luther King as he led a march with the Southern Leadership Council. Rival groups stood side by side, different ethnicities, different gangs, to protect him, and they kept their promise to be nonviolent during those protests, even as white mobsters threw rocks and bottles at them. King's dedication to fight against racism was so strong that he had been hit by a rock and hit bloody. In that protest, King had been stabbed. He was stabbed by a racist white woman, and he said that if he had sneezed, that he could have died. And he still hit the picket lines. He still protested. He came from a group of other Black radical people who were kicked out of the labor movement because of McCarthyism. Folks don't know, right? Or some folks might. In the 1930s, there was the strongest socialist, communist parties that were organizing against lynchings, that were organizing against segregation, that were organizing general strikes throughout the country, organizing multiracial organizing even in the South. But through McCarthyism, and frankly the failure of the defense of the Soviet Union to defend those people, to back them up and to protect them, they were pushed out of the labor movement. And the leaders of that labor movement, many of them were Klan members, chauvinists, racists. Just like Brother Ezekiel said, anytime you spoke against racism, you were labeled a communist. Anytime you spoke against and spoke for economic justice, you were labeled a communist. That was a way to undermine and to separate the social movements from class struggle. To say that in our unions, we only fight for workplace issues, for bread and butter issues, for benefits and dues. That we don't take a stand about issues around racism and against chauvinism. They were able to do that, and it is bathed in blood. That chauvinist, America first, was a problem that was separated the movement and weakened us completely. What we can learn from Martin Luther King is the bringing together of a united social movement around workplace issues, economic justice, and against imperialism through the leadership of the working class. Martin Luther King was able to bring together a mass mobilization of people against those issues, for those issues. He stood together for a movement that would be anti-capitalist, to challenge it. And you know what they tried to do? In fact, because Martin Luther King, other people don't know this, he suffered from depression, severe depression. In fact, he attempted to end his own life. And when the FBI found that out, they wrote letters to him, encouraging him to take his own life. Yeah, they're real insidious, right? They don't give a damn. If they're willing to support a genocide, they don't care about writing some letters. So they did that, but he did not give in to despair. And so much so that he refused to go along with that, and he continued even while he suffered from depression. Martin Luther King broke with the Democratic Party because they were the ones that were in the administration administering an attempt of genocide against the Vietnamese people. He said that, he was asked, do you think you're hurting your leadership by taking a stand on Vietnam? Aren't people going to lose respect for you? And he said, I'm sorry, I don't think you know who I am. The FBI tried to kill me, this white Jason Lee tried to kill me. All these people, I'm still gonna do it. You think that I'm gonna stop because of a war in Vietnam? No, he changed his perspective and he took a stand on it. He said that there comes a time when a person must take a position that is not safe, that is not political, that is not popular, because consciousness tells him that it is right. So we can ask ourselves, how would King align with us? How would we march together? King's denunciation of capitalism as part of an issue of poverty and war and bigotry, and part of bringing together a multiracial group. People marched all around the world carrying the pictures of King. And when you mentioned his assassination, April 4th, 1968, people in Ireland were carrying pictures of Martin Luther King while they were gunned down on Bloody Sunday. Then when we look at the banner up here, we see that the United Farm Workers, people carry pictures of the banner of King. Well, we cannot carry the picture of the banner of King in order to dilute our strong and combative political message. We cannot allow King for any longer to be used as a way to stifle our anger and discontent, but a way to inspire us and acknowledge and to help us be strategic in terms of fighting for social justice and against imperialism. Let's see. Sorry. King said that riots are the language of the unheard. He was talking about 1965 in Watts uprising that took place not too far from here against police brutality. He never denounced young people for riots, for uprising. He refused to do that. So we can't allow them to try to do that to us now. He refused to do that. And what the comrade said, in quoting Beyond Vietnam, that he must condemn the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, our own government. That means we also can't be chauvinist in terms of our opposition to the attacks on people in the U.S. I think King would say full rights for immigrants, no one is illegal. He would say that immigrants should be able to have the right to vote, the right to protest without being afraid. The fact that people are called with papers and without papers is a way to divide the working class, to create fear, and to say one group, oh, you've got to be afraid because you don't have this piece of paper, so you better not organize, you better not stand up for yourself, you better accept all these terrible wages and live in fear. That's the way that they use it. That's what they do with black people too. That's how they use that, to be able to divide the working class. He would say no. He would say full rights for immigrants. I think he would say a free Palestine. He would oppose any form of apartheid. And then you can't say you can't say fuck ICE and not say free Palestine. He would say that you have to take a position up here and you take a position worldwide. We socialists must be the greatest fighters for democratic rights. But oftentimes the way that is framed is that that is all. Yes, we have to fight for everyone to have a right to vote, but that's not our end game. We don't just want to be able to vote. We don't just want to be able to have the equal amount of healthy food and healthy education and different kind of democratic rights. We want a society, a socialist society, where democracy is on every single level. Our right for freedom of speech should not be ending at the workplace. We should be able to say what our problems are. We should be able to say what issues are in terms of housing, and speaking on a full kind of democracy, and not just here in the United States, but worldwide. It is our responsibility in the United States to take those stands because we live in the imperial core and we have an ability to stop them. The Minneapolis struggle has halted imperialist aggression worldwide. If that didn't happen, the United States would have gone even furthermore in attacking places like Cuba and Iran. So make no mistake, we have that power. And the attempts of the capitalist class to turn him into a saint, and while they denounced him while he was alive, okay, they were calling for his head when he was alive. Now Apple has pictures of King, you know. We are political actors, all of us in this room. For every Martin Luther King, there's hundreds of people whose names we don't know and we may never know, who were just as brave and just as courageous, who dedicated their lives to creating a better world. It's important for us to see ourselves as being part of that. And I think our greater understanding of King with the movement against all forms of oppression, for internationalism, for socialism, which must be class independent, that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And it is our task, and we must meet it with the same determination and relentlessness and love and solidarity that King had. And until, as the Black National Anthem says, until victory is won. Thank you.
to a breakout activity. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
let's
Yes.
Any questions?
Yes.
Why are we still playing with the Democratic Party? They Gaza. you
Wow,
know,
that's a
fighting
great
for the-
question.
That's a great question.
That's a really good question.
Come on, people.
Okay.
I don't want it.
Okay.
I don't want to play with the Democratic Party. I've been. You talk about this. Like there's a discussion about that in DSA. Some of us don't want to play with the Democratic Party
Yeah.
anymore.
There you have
Others
it.
do. It keeps coming up for vote at national convention too. It's like, shall we split? Well, it kind of loses like 60-40 or something like that, but it's a constant topic.
What I would want to say in a positive way is that the DSA has such an opportunity, such a mobilization, such a fighting group. I mean, look at what happened with the rent stabilization ordinance. There's so much that we can see beyond. It isn't just to roast the Democrats, even though they deserve it, and we should. It's also in the positive way that we see ourselves as its own political and independent force to be able to take on these issues. So that's my view, you know. So I also write for Left Voice, which is a group as well that writes about these things. But I feel like the DSA is super powerful. Everybody's paying attention to us. Everybody's watching us. What if we had our own thing, right? Like not what they're wanting and we do a little bit more lefty, but like if we wanted to actually have a civil rights movement, that what would it be? And that's what I want to also think for people to think about. What's our bill of civil rights? You know, stuff like that. Anyway, I know we could all talk about all of it, but yeah. And maybe we'll take one or two more and then we can do the breakout. Is that okay?
I just want to reiterate the Poor People's Movement is still going with Bishop Barber down in South Carolina. He has Moral Mondays every week. So that's another group we can align with.
Yeah.
Because what he points out is that there are millions of poor people who don't understand the power of their vote. So we could actually take over the government and reshape it into something that would resemble egalitarian society. It's up to us.
It is up to us. That's right.
Yes, I wanted to say that not only was the white establishment against Martin Luther King, but the black establishment was against Martin Luther King. Especially once he started speaking out against the Vietnam War, the black clergy said, now you're going too far. And I think that put a target on his head more than anything. He started becoming an internationalist. And for him to die helping sanitation workers, he never got the big head like a lot of the organizers. And also I want to give props to Jesse Jackson, that, you know, used to be our ancestors. He was militant just like, well, I think Martin Luther King was more militant, but Jesse Jackson's stand on Palestine back in those days when nobody was speaking of it. You remember Yasser Arafat and rescuing hostages in Syria. I just wanted to point that out, that I'm really proud of our ancestors.
And the union where the sanitation workers was absent.
Yay! Who's a union member here? Yes, let's go. You gotta take over our unions too. Because they're giving all our dues money to the Democrats. So then, don't we wanted to break out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
breakouts, yeah.